Oh wow. Oh wow. Wow. The show is bad. It's really, really bad. It's so bad that as I continued watching Netflix's Devil May Cry anime, I found myself slowly forgetting what it meant to feel happiness. Entire emotions became foreign to me, and eventually, cognitive function ceased, and I was pronounced clinically dead. Completely flatlined, no pulse anywhere on my body. That is the general rundown of what the show does to you. You are technically no longer alive when you watch this series. Your conscience is transported to an otherworldly dimension that's beige in color and is devoid of any and all life. Kinda like Davy Jones's locker, but without the funny rock crabs. Humorous exaggeration aside, this show sucks. It's yet another entry in the ever-growing catalog of botched video game adaptations. I already suffered a great deal watching Amazon's take on the Like a Dragon and Halo franchises, and while they are indeed awful, I have to admit that I didn't finish either of them. And had I not been with a friend, I probably wouldn't have finished this series either. In short, Netflix's Devil May Cry anime made me want to die. But perhaps I shouldn't be too surprised that it turned out this way, because the writing was on the wall from the very beginning. I was initially confused when they announced the casting choice of Dante, that of course being Johnny Yunbosh. If you're a DMC fan, this should strike you as odd, because in the games, he voices Nero, an entirely different character. But whatever, I saw the point, eventually I saw the point, saw what they were going for, thought it was a little interesting, had some potential, but that initial confusion with bits of anticipation had quickly fizzled out once the promotion started to really ramp up. Hearing Dante babble in out of character fashion, hearing Limp Bizkit as the opening theme, seeing the villain's motivations, hearing Virgil quote "Bury the light" almost verbatim. Yeah, with all this promotion, it quickly became obvious who the target demographic was gonna be. And if you think said demographic contains fans of the show, yeah, no. This series is completely divorced from what makes the video game franchise so beloved. They fucked with the lore, the characters, the general art direction and atmosphere. Hell, even the action feels restrained here. If you're gonna adapt a franchise best known for its raucous and over the top action, the last thing you want it to be is boring, and that's exactly how this show feels. The action is your typical swooshy anime effects and basic choreography, with CGI integration that looks absolutely atrocious. The CG is so laughably bad, and it fails to mesh with the world around it. There's also just a generally cheap look to it. They had to have cut some serious corners here. The CG is legit several years behind its time. But let's cut it with the small talk already and get to the good stuff. Needless to say, there are an abundance of issues with this adaptation. So many that deciding which one to address first was genuinely difficult. But after some serious thought, I've decided that perhaps the best thing to analyze first is a thing much of us had probably noticed first: the characters and how they're handled here. As with any adaptation, there are a lot of new faces here, so I suppose I'll get to them first and foremost. But the thing about them is, I kinda don't give a shit. There's this gangster pimp fella named Enzo, who's a fucking loser. The vice president, who's voiced by the late Kevin Costner, and he's the most painfully on the nose caricature of Christians I have ever seen. There's this group of super cops who suck and end up getting killed because of it. Yeah, sorry for the totally blunt descriptions, but I just simply cannot be bothered to discuss them any further than that, because there's nothing to them that would warrant a deeper discussion. These guys don't have many discernible personality traits, and the ones we do see are pretty rudimentary and generic. However, there is this one side character who does indeed stand out, but for all the wrong reasons. I can't remember his name, nor do I care to remember it, so I'll instead refer to him as Bobby Swordfish. So Bobby is a character who has a pretty solid enough conflict. He's a man deeply insecure over his inability to protect his family. His encounter with the White Rabbit left him as a sole survivor, but this came at the expense of his confidence. This leaves him with the dilemma of whether or not he's fit to protect his family and by extension, all of humanity, given that he couldn't protect himself. Fairly solid premise for a character, even if a bit been there, done that. However, the execution behind it results in one of the most comically pitiful characters I have ever seen in fiction. If you thought this guy was going to go through an arc where he'd learn to toughen up for his family's sake, well, you'd be dead wrong because he ends up being a total bitch. He even gives up the amulet to the White Rabbit out of his cowardice. Like, bro, not even a heroic final stand? How would your children feel if they saw you hand the villain a W because you couldn't grow any balls? Why don't you stop with the self-pity party and actually do something, you default Sims character fuck? And given how his story ends, I don't think we're going to be seeing a redemption arc anytime soon. Womp womp, I guess. So that's the side characters done and dusted. Now, what about our main party? Dante and Lady. Uh, More like Lady featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series. Seriously, why is Dante such a bitch in this? Why does he take a backseat and have Lady do all the heavy lifting? I shit you not, Lady has significantly more screen time than Dante, and while that's pretty bad enough on its own, it becomes much worse when you factor in how they impact the overall plot. Lady's backstory and stakes in the story are far more interesting, and it constantly felt as if it were her story. Oh, by the way, she too is inspired from the power of the writer's quote-unquote creative liberties. It's relatively the same premise, sure, but the execution is pretty baffling, and it completely misses the point of what made her such a compelling character in the games. The term character assassination is one of the most divisive ones on the internet, on top of it being used incorrectly quite often. However, in regards to Dante and especially Lady, there is no other term that describes them more accurately. Lady, in the anime, feels like the final boss of characters born out of the idea that constant swearing and assertive attitude makes for a strong female character. I hate this so much, especially for a character like Lady. In the games, she's a strong but vulnerable person who learns to confront her trauma in a way that's deeply realistic and deeply nuanced. She's a little cold towards the other characters, sure, but that's due to the aforementioned trauma, and once Arkham is done and dusted, she kinda just vibes out and shit. But sadly, the anime flanderizes the living fuck out of the colder aspects of her character. This has already been discussed to death on social media. It's probably the thing people talk about the most in regards to this show, so I won't go super deep into it, but allow me to reiterate the fact that she cusses. A lot. And I mean a lot. I've seen Helva Boss comparisons get tossed around, but even that sounds like a compliment when compared to the reality of her character. Lady feels like she's written by someone with a questionable level of experience in talking to women, and an even more questionable level of experience in adult-oriented media. Dude, I have to stress, like, seriously stress, that almost every other word contains some sort of profanity. It's genuinely excessive. And it didn't take long for it to start feeling excessive either. It's like the writers can't articulate any feelings of anguish without resorting to obscenities. They don't even get clever with the profanity either. It's just constant fucks and vulgar nicknames with little to no imagination behind them. Fucking family? What the fuck would you know about family? You're a fucking demon. God, it's bad. And now that we've got Lady out of the way, I guess now is the time to start analyzing Dante. And depending on who you ask, his characterization was botched even harder. I think Lady was written worse overall, but Dante is the worst overall character. Like I mentioned earlier, Dante was nerfed into the goddamn ground. He frequently has trouble defeating enemies and achieving feats he could do in the games with a blindfold on. There's also this bizarre power imbalance in general, and it's absolutely heinous. With much of Dante's combative effectiveness feeling dependent on whatever the plot demands. Dante goes from the all-powerful badass we know him to be, and I'm not kidding, a jobber at a moment's notice. So in one scene, he can take out a group of elite guards akin to his game counterpart, but when the plot needs to artificially create tension, he'll get bitched by some smoke grenade and some handcuffs. Wow, so much for being the son of Sparta, am I right? Like, even in the show, they literally hype him up to be this all-powerful warrior that needed an entire like squad of super elite, super trained, professional killers, super cops, fucking assassins and shit, and yet he gets bitched by a smoke grenade. Wow. 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 Okay. Jesus Christ. Imagine if he went to fight like Game Dante. God. It would be sad to see. I almost don't even want to imagine it, because it'd be so gruesome. I hate it so much when a powerful character sees their abilities reduced in service to the demands of the writers. It makes their power feel arbitrary, and in several cases across the series, makes one of the deadliest protagonists in video game history look like a goddamn chump. He even has trouble beating Rudra with his Devil Trigger form. Like, come on, man. Like, Lady kills him with a single bullet. Like, what the fuck? What I find to be the most offensive is when Dante literally begs the enemy to give him a minute so he can remove the aforementioned handcuffs. Dante, the son of Sparta, the most feared warrior even in this universe, whining for the enemy to give him a minute. Can we be real for a moment? Speaking of jobbing, he even needs Lady to subdue the big bad so that he can deliver the finishing blow. Wow. I hate this. How silly. How unbelievably dumb. His personality doesn't fare any better either, mind you. His personality is a much hotter topic on the internet, and yeah, there's a reason for that. The reason being that it sucks an entire ass. As in, the entire ass. It's not just a cheek or the crack or whatever, no, it's the whole damn ass. Dante's characterization here sucks booty. What's worse is that people have begun acting as if Dante were like this from the beginning, conflating traits of arrogant self-confidence with corny MCU-esque one-liners. I can assure you that Dante's game counterpart is nothing like his Netflix counterpart. His character does not begin and end with cockiness, it's far more nuanced than that. Dante's arrogance in the games come from a place of, again, confidence. He knows he's the baddest mofo around, and his banter with the demons is reflective of this trait. His arrogance is also more of the suave and charismatic variety, where, yes, he does boast quite a bit, but he does so in a way that feels mature. Conversely, this Dante is a facsimile of those aforementioned traits. Instead of getting under the skin of his foes with smug, clever taunts, he instead talks about baning some dude's mom, and it's like, dude, really? Who the hell are you? When does Game Dante say anything remotely similar? Not to mention the moments where he completely breaks character and stammers like a moron. We've all seen that initial preview where he whines about his inability to come up with a quick one-liner, and it still makes me depressed. Again, the thing that makes Dante Dante is his confidence. I really do not understand why someone would bother writing him in such an incongruous way. Speaking of things being incongruous, the overarching narrative is so thoroughly different than the actual game's lore, you'd swear this were just some fanfiction a Netflix executive decided to greenlight for some sick joke. Kinda like how the school bully entices the nerd to read out his poem for the whole class to hear. But instead of whatever corny shit the kid in question would read, we get political commentary that's so on the nose it may as well be a Pearson. Like, from the get-go, this Hot Topic Roger Rabbit starts spewing some garbage about American imperialism, regurgitated in the same comically unsubtle fashion you've heard a billion times before already. Moments later, it shows a series of news anchors and influencers whose dialogue is so pandering that it make the boys blush. And by that point, me and the friend I watched it with had to literally pause it so we could take a quick belly laugh break. Like, it became so abundantly clear what the series would be going for at that point, but the laughs just kept coming and coming, because it somehow got even worse as the series went on. Like, we eventually learn of the many demons that have taken refuge here on Earth. Ah yes, metaphors for Middle Eastern refugees. Very Devil May Cry. Look, I'm not the type of dipshit who complains about wokeness or whatever. Because that term has become so bastardized, it practically doesn't even mean anything anymore. A term once used as a warning against the rising groups of neo-Nazis and white supremacy, in general, has now been watered down into a word people arbitrarily use to describe a political or social thing they personally disagree with. 9 times out of 10, the term is used because they're too much of a coward to be honest with themselves, and just say they hate black people, trans people, poor people, whatever the case may be. And with that out of the way, I can now describe the many reasons why this choice was a deeply bad one. Like, a very bad one. For one thing, it obviously doesn't fit in a franchise like Devil May Cry, considering that demons have always been portrayed as unambiguously evil pieces of shit, with no remorse or empathy of any kind. Now, before you get on my case by bringing up Sparta, being like, oh, they've shown that demons can be emotional too, let me remind you all that what made Sparta special is that it was a major exception. Pretty much the only exception. In terms of pure demons, at least. Characters like Trish don't count because she was designed after Dante's mother. Getting back on track, Sparta's rebellion was a result of some good old romance he had with a human woman. The relationship he had with this woman helped Sparta to realize that it's kinda pretty fucked up, thus convincing him to seal the two species apart from each other. And now that this little piece of trivia is fresh in your mind, you can likely ascertain how the changes the anime made to his backstory kinda ruins it. Because what this change ends up doing is painting Sparta as not exactly a bad guy, but not the brave and remarkable hero we know him as. If demons can indeed possess similar emotional capabilities as a human, then Sparta's act of condemning them to the demon world kinda makes him look like an asshole, and it severely undermines what he stands for in the series. Whatever, they'll probably make him the bad guy and paint Mundus as a savior in Season 2 or some stupid bullshit like that. So that's the story reason why this decision was an awful one. Now here's the political reason. I cannot be the only one who sees a huge red flag in designing literal demons after Middle Eastern stereotypes. I do not think the people involved in this show had thought this decision through carefully. These demons are also kinda humanoid, and are the subjects of cruel scientific experiments. They are also portrayed as totally helpless beings who need to rely on the big, strong humans to come and save them. I reiterate, these demons have vaguely Middle Eastern design traits, and are an obvious allegory for refugees. Like, this is literally the most white Democrat bullshit I've ever seen. On top of all that, we get even more obvious allegories. One for American occupation in the Middle East as well. Seriously, that whole sequence of humans conquering the demon world, or at least a part of it, was again completely unsubtle. Oh yeah, Green Day's American Idiot is playing while all this is being shown too, as if they couldn't have hammered the point in any further. This music choice is also in extremely poor taste when you consider the fact that they literally played a show in Dubai just this past January. It's also just so fucking hilarious, they're literally blaring American Idiot, while a slideshow of humans murdering demons plays. This is a level of subtlety we're dealing with, folks. Also, the music in this is awful. Limp Bizkit and Rage Against the Machine are whatever. But the original Evanescence song and that fucking Last Resort remix is god awful. Christ, Ronnie Radke already ruined this song by turning it into some goddamn piano ballad. We don't need to further hamper this song. The original compositions are nothing special either. Just some vaguely metallic guitars, some cookie cutter EDM shit, and the guy screaming on top of it all. It's basically Ninja Theory DMC all over again. This entire show is, matter of fact. Granted, I'll still take this over that, because at the very least, the Netflix series isn't deliberately pissing in the fans' faces. But it's a damn feat that the comparisons are even warranted at all. This series just sucks, man. Everything is so bastardized. I don't mind change as long as it tries to stick to the original continuity somewhat, but this series doesn't do anything like that. Like I said before, it's a glorified fanfiction through and through. It's clear that a story as paper thin and generic as this couldn't stand on its own, so it needed to be associated with a popular IP or else no one would give a shit. Try looking at the series in a vacuum and what are you left with? American commentary for dummies. One of the most shallow takes on an already tired premise. With writing that's so expository, it feels like the voice actors are reading off a Wikipedia page. That's another thing I forgot to mention, the exposition in this is painful. Characters will either over-explain something that didn't need it, or they'll describe something that literally just happened on screen in excruciating detail. But a lot of the time, these two go hand in hand. Like, did we really need this verbose explanation behind the anti-demon bullets? We don't care about the science behind it, damn it. We are literally watching a show where a twink fights Hellspawn for a living. Fuck. I don't doubt that season 2 will be far from an improvement. Matter of fact, given how this season ended, I think it's safe to assume that it could be even worse. Should make for a laugh or two at least, though. Season 1 was already a goldmine. I can only imagine the sort of hilarity that lies ahead. One last statement I'd like to mention in order to wrap this up is that I firmly believe that any and every adaptation should appeal to the fans first and foremost. Again, I'm not asking for a one-to-one adaptation, we have the games for that. And again, I am perfectly fine with a completely original story in a separate continuity. But if you're adapting a well-established IP, you should at least avoid interpretations that are ill-fitting of said IP. Like, fuck, dude, the Sonic movies, yes, those Paramount Sonic movies, as horrible as they are, even knew not to fuck this up. Like you know you did something wrong when the Sonic Paramount movies are better, are a more faithful adaptation. Like, Netflix, you suck, man. Do better. Is it really crazy of me to wish for an adaptation to stick to the source material and use that to craft a unique story? Like, the lore and characters of DMC are a lot more vast than what people give it credit for, allowing for a ton of potential for an adaptation. Why not do a prequel starring Sparta? Why not provide an actually finished version of DMC4's story? Why not do literally anything else besides this? Don't turn the Devil May Cry story into a political commentary on American involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts. It makes no goddamn sense. Don't turn Dante into a juvenile goofball. These traits make no sense for him to have. Yeah, I've dragged this out for long enough, and I think you all get my points by now. If you're really curious as to what I'd rate this, I'd probably have to give it a 1. Brutal! Maybe a 2 if I'm feeling generous. This was just not a very pleasant watch at all, but I guess it made me laugh a couple times. See you bitches later. Also, why the hell is Dante a VTuber?